Lone wolf means a person decided to act on their own, not at the explicit direction of an extremist group or organization. It doesn't mean there's no connection at all, but these connections are typically more indirect and informal. When the person is a member of a more formal group, they make their own decision to take action. I've been hearing this a lot, especially after a major incident like the Buffalo shooting. He's not a lone actor. Look at all of these different connections. Look at everyone he talked to online, all the information that he consumed. I hear you. The misconception is pretty common and completely understandable. The name lone wolf implies doing something entirely on your own. It's not the most accurate or fitting analogy, and there's a lot of good cases that have been made that we should just be dropping that descriptor altogether, but it started being used, it stuck, so we're kind of stuck with it. So yes, technically the Buffalo shooter is a lone wolf. In contrast, if you want to look at a different but similar incident, you go back to December 2019, the jihadist who shot 11 people, killing 3 of them at the Naval Air Base in Pensacola, Florida, is not a lone wolf. He had extensive connections with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and was consistently planning with them. Yes, he acted alone, but he had specific connections and they were working on that specific plot together, so not a lone wolf. Those that don't have direct connections with others may end up self-radicalizing, either by obtaining information on the internet or from other literature, which appears to be the path of the Buffalo shooter. He got a hold of this stuff in different forums, ended up getting lost in it as they dig further and further down, spend more time with this extremist content, and it ended up reshaping his ideology as he became more and more radicalized. Sympathizing with them, identifying with the same ideology, even if they don't have any kind of formal connections. Ultimately driving in them an us versus them mentality that dehumanizes others who were the target of this propaganda and ultimately lowers psychological inhibitions toward engaging in different kinds of criminal acts, including violence. Lone wolf terrorism is not restricted to any one ideology. Sovereign citizens are very common, white supremacists, white nationalists, anti-abortion, extremists. You see it a lot with jihadists, and you also see some of it with animal and environmental rights extremists, although they tend to act in smaller little groups. This has been a natural shift over the course of the last 2-3 decades, as more terrorist organizations have been moving away from a more formalized or centralized control model, instead trying to focus on inspiring others who are not directly connected to them but would sympathize with their cause to act on their own. This approach was extraordinarily successful for ISIL, for example, from 2013 to about 2018-19. This model has been increasingly embraced because as a formal organization, you're a bigger target. It's easier to take out your leaders, it's easier to take out your command and control structure. This is a model known as Leaderless Resistance, where you're encouraging others to act on their own and to form their own small groups, some of which may end up taking violent action. The end result is you end up achieving your broader goals, you end up in the same spot without having to expend the same amount of energy, resources, planning, personnel, all those things. And it also gives you some plausible deniability. You weren't directly involved. These people acted completely on their own. Now that at the same time makes it a lot more challenging to pick out exactly who is going to end up carrying out any kind of violent action like a shooting or a bombing. For example, let's say you have 10,000 people that end up coming across this extremist propaganda, conspiratorial literature, stuff like that. Out of that 10,000, 1,000 might come to kind of believe it, sort of. They kind of just like, well, yeah, I think there might be something to that. Maybe 100 of them will actually end up adopting an ideology, become really strong, hardcore believers, really believing in stuff. Maybe only 1 would actually be inclined to carry out some kind of violent attack. How do you identify out of that big group that 1 person or 2 people? How do you pick that person out? It can be very difficult to do. There are a lot of plots that have been foiled. It is possible to stop it before it happens, but unfortunately, sometimes they're able to carry out their plot and innocent people are hurt and killed. So that's the challenge with the lone actors or lone wolves, whatever you want to call them. They act on their own. It's hard to predict. It's a problem that's here to stay and a challenge we'll have to continue to confront.